Fantastic. Well, here we go. Thank you guys all so much for coming to this impeachment hearing for the Tennessee College Republicans chairman. I appreciate you you guys all taking the time out of your busy schedules to do that. Hopefully we can, make this a very worthwhile experience for everyone who came. It is currently 2:06 p.m. Central on Saturday, the 25th of March. And please note this hearing is being recorded and it will be dispersed after its recording for the record. So go to the next slide. So here's our agenda for this hearing. As you guys can see, I did send this to everyone prior, but I'll also go over this now. So first, we'll have an introduction statement on the impeachment and removal process from the hearing chair. That's me. Hello, everyone. I'm Shane from Vanderbilt, the Vanderbilt president. I'm a senior, majoring in political science, economics, business minor. Feel free, when everyone else wants your guys' time to talk, feel free to introduce yourselves as well. Then I'll give an opening statement, and then the impeached chair will give his opening statement if he chooses to attend. And then each chapter chair in attendance will deliver their own statement, present any evidence they'd like to, and then question the impeached chair if he chooses to attend. And we'll just go in alphabetical order just to keep it simple. Suggested time of 5 minutes, but you guys, you feel free if you need more time, feel free. Because I know some chapters want to have multiple people speak. Like I know the UTK chapter is going to want to have Caesar and Will speak. So obviously, and then lastly, we'll end it with a closing statement from myself. So now from the actual TNCR bylaws, here is where we have the authority to impeach and remove the chairman. So as you can see in Article 3, Section 12, it says any chapter chair or member of the board of directors may bring impeachment proceedings against any officer. As chapter chair of Vanderbilt, that's what I did. An officer may be removed if he or she partakes in any action prohibited by these bylaws or has not fulfilled his or her duties. We've described this in thorough detail in our open letter, which I believe everyone's seen, but I'm also going to go over it here on this call as well. An officer may be removed by either a 2/3 vote of the entire board of directors or a 2/3 vote of all chapter chairs. We're doing that 2/3 vote of all chapter chairs. And just for the record, we have 13 active TNCR chapters. So we would need 9 yes votes on removal for removal. And the way we're going to conduct that vote is at 6:02 p.m. Central on this coming Friday, actually, which is exactly 2 weeks after the notice of impeachment. I'm going to send out a Google form for the chapter chairs to fill out, saying if they would vote yes or vote no. That way we can make sure everyone has their voice heard and is able to vote instead of trying to assemble everyone on a call, because as we know, we all have busy schedules, so calls are kind of hard. And in order to fill out this form, people will have to sign into an email account that belongs to them. That way we'll be verifying, that the votes are authentic. And the officer in question must be notified of the intention of removal 2 weeks prior to either the respective vote and be granted the ability to respond accordingly. That's why we're holding this hearing as a courtesy to give the chairman an opportunity to respond if he chooses, but he could have responded in writing also this entire time or any other method, except in extraordinary circumstances. So here's my opening statement now. And basically I will just be reading our open letter, providing all the evidence that supports it, because obviously no one's really seen all the evidence supporting it outside of our coalition here, because if we put all the evidence in the letter, it would have been like a 30-page letter, because this is a 30-slide PowerPoint. So dear TNCR State Chairman Harsh Mehta, we, the over 150 undersigned officers, former officers, and members of 9 college Republican chapters in the great state of Tennessee, write this letter to publicly demand your immediate resignation as Tennessee College Republicans TNCR State Chairman due to your undemocratic and unprofessional conduct and flagrant violation of the TNCR bylaws. On March 4th, many of us attended the TNCR State Convention, where we were asked to vote for a number of TNCR board candidates, all but one of which were uncontested, including your race for state chairman. This election was uncontested for one obvious reason. You attempted to stack it with people you liked. For instance, VCR, that's the Vanderbilt chapter, was not given any opportunity to run any opposing candidates, as you personally neglected to inform us how to do so as the principal liaison to our chapter as Middle Tennessee vice chair. And I will note, principal liaison is how it's defined in the bylaws. It's how Harsh describes himself on his LinkedIn in that role. And it's also how the former chairman, Will Ogles, described the role, but I know he's going to have an opportunity to talk later, so he can talk more about that. As such, we, the undersigned, view your chairmanship as illegitimate. We believe that this was not only a purposeful power grab, but also retaliation against VCR, given you've called VCR profanities ranging from F's to human garbage to other chapters. So here is that evidence of him calling us F'ers, human garbage, and a D word. You can look at that. And this was sent to Belmont President Emma Curtis. Here are all the emails between Mr. Mehta and myself discussing the state convention. Not once did he mention we would be allowed to run candidates, and the whole time we were assuming that would be a process that we would do at the state convention, given he did not mention to us. So you're free to look through these emails, and also send a copy of this PowerPoint out via email after this hearing as well, if you guys would like to look into it more in depth. So here is this email chain, and then we've got another email chain. This is just a continuation of that original one. And then we've got the last emails. And then we've got also the email Mr. Mehta sent to everybody who signed up for the state convention. And again, he did not mention anything about running candidates, just to dress in business professional. So we were under the impression that that would be something that would happen at the convention, because we were not invited to the convention the previous year. So we truthfully knew nothing about the convention. So then on March 5th, you proposed a new set of TNCR bylaws that significantly increase your powers and legitimate chairman, allowing you to unilaterally revoke the charter of any chapter you deem to be in violation of the newly proposed bylaws. See Article 2, Section 7 and 8D. In those sections, basically, it said any violation of the proposed bylaws would result in immediate revocation for 2 rechartering cycles, and also said all the bylaws were up to the sole interpretation of the chairman. Additionally, your proposed bylaws require yearly payments of $5 per chapter member to TNCR, which we, the undersigned, all vehemently oppose. VCR's board then sought to explain that such dues would severely limit club membership/growth and be prohibited from our universities. We personally, our school, we're not allowed to send school funds to outside organizations. And after talking to many of these other chapters, they also have the same rules. And upon hearing that we literally could not pay TNCR dues, you cut communication with VCR, saying that compromising would make you look weak. You then ignored repeated requests from VCR to see the current TNCR bylaws or to receive contact info for other chapter presidents and TNCR's board of directors, leaving us unprepared for the sham bylaws vote on March 11th. We finally received a copy of the legitimate TNCR bylaws from a former TNCR leader on March 12th, despite your best attempt to keep them from us. Thank you, Caesar. He was the one who gave that to us. By refusing to provide VCR with the requested reasonable information and opportunity to run TNCR candidates and defaming the organization, you're in flagrant violation of Article 3, Section 11 of the real TNCR bylaws, as it requires you to exhibit full fiduciary responsibility for TNCR and the chapters, which you failed to do by purposefully ignoring our many requests. So now we've got some evidence of that. Again, this is to Belmont President Emma Curtis, who on that Saturday prior to the sham vote was asking Harsh to just negotiate and call us and just talk to us, because that's really all we wanted. And here he is saying, why would I compromise when I have a supermajority? Which he had 2 chapters siding with him. I don't know how any reasonable person could view 2 chapters agreeing with you as a supermajority. And he also said reaching out to us would make him look weak. Yeah, obviously not true. And again, every chapter chair will have an opportunity to speak after this, but I mean, all the other chapters were excluded from this as well. So just very sad. And then also because he did say, Vanderbilt, all our members are false numbers, which, I mean, this is getting a bit into the weeds, but I would like the opportunity to just refute that, because it personally hurts my feelings and the feelings of every member of our board who has worked tirelessly to put on fantastic events on our campus. So I'd just like to put some pictures of our false numbers on the screen for the record. So this is from our last meeting, which had over 200 Vanderbilt students in attendance. We had all their emails collected, and I mean, clearly they're real people. So I would just like to show this picture. I would also like to show these other images of meetings from this academic year, where we have tons of people at our meetings. And again, we have all their emails and all their names and all the meetings that they attended. And here are some more meetings as well. So as you can see, a lot of people come to our meetings. We've got 80 people at this one right here on the bottom. This is our affirmative action debate. And the one over there on the top is Congressman Green coming to speak to us. And yeah, if we go back to this slide too, not this slide, this was all the way over here. I guess we're bad something because of the Congressman Green meeting. I mean, this was never communicated to us that we weren't supposed to schedule a meeting that week. And even if it was, under what authority does this random person have to tell us when to schedule our meetings when Congressman Green himself requested that date? So it's just, the whole thing is just beyond belief to me. Yeah, so proof that we exist. Okay, and now here's a copy of the actual TNCR bylaws, where it says the state chairman must act solely in the best interest of TNCR chapters. This is that section about the fiduciary duty. So if I'm going to read it verbatim, the board of directors shall possess full fiduciary responsibility for the organization, its chapters, and its chartered membership. So it's not even just the state chairman, it is the whole board of directors. So that is just something to note for future reference. And if anyone does not know the definition of fiduciary, it is the legal responsibility to act solely in the best interest of another party, solely. Good luck proving that. So anyway, now we've got more screenshots. This is Mr. Mehta texting me, well, actually me trying to text him prior to the sham bylaws vote. Basically, several of my other board members over at Vanderbilt, specifically Secretary Ron Yee and Treasurer Harrison Tucker, and I believe others too, like Secretary Noah Jenkins, were trying to get through to Harsh and explain to him our opposition to these bylaws because he did not want to hear our opinion. So I texted him. I said, hey, I believe they've been trying to reach out to you and get this information. Could you send it to us? No response. So then I said, hey, what time is the Zoom? Can I get the Zoom link? He responds to that. I said, great. Would you mind sending us over the other chapter chair's contact info in the current TNCR bylaws? No response. And then I say, oh, is there a bylaw that says other board members are not allowed to be present on the call? Because our treasurer, Harrison Tucker, kept telling me, he's like, I would really like to be on the call, given this man will not pick up any of my calls, because I would like to explain to him the Vanderbilt rules and how we cannot abide by this. And then he responded and says, bylaws specifically state blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, can we please have a copy of the bylaws? And then I'm like, hi, Harsh. This was the Friday prior to the Saturday where this vote occurred. Hi, Harsh. Hope you're having a great Friday. Just following up for the last time to see if we can kindly get the TNCR bylaws by the end of the day. So we were constantly asking for A, the bylaws, the actual bylaws, B, the chapter chair's contact info, and C, his board of directors contact info. And he just simply would not provide that to us. And this proof is quite obvious here. And then here I have screenshots from our very own treasurer, Harrison Tucker, who placed nearly 20 calls to Harsh Mehta, Mr. Mehta, the week leading up to the sham bylaws vote, and not a single one was returned, and not a single text message was sent to Harrison addressing his concerns. And he was extremely, extremely saddened by this. So he wanted me to read this statement from him because he's not able to attend this hearing because he's in mandatory military training. So I'll just read this very quickly. I understand he's emailed this to all the chapter chairs, so I'm sure you guys have already seen it. But Mr. Tucker says, hello, hearing board. I apologize in advance for my absence from this important impeachment hearing. I'm currently in military training for the past several weeks. TNCR Chairman Harsh Mehta has repeatedly ignored my calls and messages. I wanted to get his perspective on the specifics of his proposed bylaws, the vote for these bylaws, and the effects these bylaws would have on TNCR and all chapters. The evidence of my attempted calls demonstrates how urgent this issue was at the time until this impeachment hearing, and his unwillingness to answer, which he should be doing as TNCR chairman. I've never met Harsh in person, but the lack of communication demonstrates his lack of professionalism and transparency. He never allowed me to attend the vote for these bylaws since he claimed that he got to choose how his meetings were conducted. From what I know, Vanderbilt and only a few other chapters were allowed to vote, excluding many chapters throughout Tennessee. I completely understand the anger and frustration of those chapters that were excluded from the vote. As I contacted members of TNCR's board of directors, I noticed that none had a clue of Harsh's long-term goals for these bylaws. As more evidence was presented through other members of TNCR, I saw him use vulgar language towards fellow TNCR members. He directed his anger towards my chapter of Vanderbilt specifically. He also used the vulnerability of TNCR members to gain more authority. It seemed that he attempted to use TNCR Secretary Emma Curtis solely as an information collector for a possible internship at the Tennessee State Capitol. I believe that Harsh Mehta has no remorse for his actions, no character whatsoever, and should be removed from his position immediately so he does not cause more harm to TNCR. Please let me know before this impeachment hearing if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. Thank you. Very respectfully, Harrison Tucker. And again, that's our treasurer. So now back to the open letter. Then you openly lied about the result of the March 11th vote on your proposed bylaws you claimed to pass, which consisted of two separate votes of the TNCR board of directors and the chapter chairs. In attendance on the chapter chair call were only presidents from MTSU, that's Mr. Mehta, Carson Newman, Cumberland, and Vanderbilt, as Belmonts could not make it due to a last-minute emergency, and other chapters such as UTK, Austin P, Lee, Memphis, Tennessee Tech, and ETSU were not made aware of such a monumental vote, and those 6 plus Swanee were not invited to the vote either. So I'm sure Peter will talk about this during his time, but that's just crazy that he told Peter, hey, we're going to do this bylaw vote, and then just did not invite him. Love to learn more about that. This is a violation of the actual TNCR bylaws, as Article 2, Section 5 states, chapters remain chartered unless a vote comes up and passes 2/3 of the board of directors after failing to recharter for 2 consecutive cycles, not just missing the spring rechartering cycle, which only stops the chapter from getting a vote at the convention, not on changing the bylaws. Thus, these charter chapters should have been informed of the bylaws vote and been allowed to participate. So here from the actual TNCR bylaws, it says any chapter may have their recognition, and again, folks, may have their recognition revoked by 2/3 vote of the board of directors when it is reasonably judged that the chapter is inactive, or if a chapter fails to submit chartering information for 2 consecutive rechartering cycles. So again, not only is it not automatic, but there would have to be a record of a vote of the board, of directors, which never happened. Because I mean, previous chair Will Ogles, who was on this call, he would have witnessed this stuff. And additionally, these chapters would have been reached out to and said, hey, we're going to vote on you, or hey, we just voted you guys out of existence, or some sort of warning, which was never provided. Yeah. So here we have some more supporting evidence. So here's Mr. Mehta giving a couple of us a notice of vote for the new bylaws. So he only sent it to me, Peter from Swanee, and Carson from Carson Newman. Kind of strange, only 3 chapter chairs would be on that notice. Up to you guys to decide if that's strange. And then also when he sent the chapter chairs meeting Zoom link for the alleged vote, he only sent that to me, Carson Newman, Emma, and it looks like Cumberland. So again, Peter is not there. And again, if there are only such few chapters, according to him, in existence, you would think you'd remember to send it to Peter. And yeah, only 4 chapter chairs from Vanderbilt, Carson Newman, Cumberland, and Belmont were invited to this call. So now just continuing with the open letter here, including Belmont's vote, the bylaws were defeated. 2 no to 3 yes, even on the sham call, falling short of the necessary 2/3 majority you claimed was needed to pass. However, you claimed without evidence that Belmont's vote could not be counted, despite such a stipulation preventing chapter chairs from proxy voting not existing in the actual bylaws. To the contrary, the actual TNCR bylaws in Article 9, Section 1, I don't know if that's Section 9, Article IX, I can't read Roman, but clearly state that out of convention bylaw changes require a unanimous vote by the TNCR Board of Directors, a 2/3 vote by all chapter chairs, not just someone to call since chapter chairs don't have a quorum, and at least a 1-week notice prior to the votes. Unanimous consent was not given by the Board of Directors. Secretary Emma Curtis voted no, and no official minutes have been dispersed. So there's no proof this call even happened. Similarly, 2/3 of all the chapter chairs did not vote, as once again, 7 undersigned chapters weren't even invited to the vote. Therefore, we find you in gross violation of the real TNCR bylaws by falsely claiming that your bylaws passed. Similarly, the vote itself is further rendered null and void by Article 9, Section 1, as your proposed bylaws were only provided to a small group of chapters on Sunday, March 5th, while the vote of a still limited group of chapter chairs was on Saturday, March 11th, which is not a week or more later. And you'd think, again, that's one of those 3 main requirements for passing the bylaws. The week notice, you'd think you could just give a week notice and you wouldn't give a 6-day notice. So even that renders them null and void. And again, here's that Article 9, Section 1 that specifies how bylaws can be passed. And again, it says at least 1 week in advance in that first box. And then on the second box, it says it can only be considered outside of convention under unanimous consent of the Board of Directors, which he did not have. And if that consent is granted, which was not, but let's say it was, you would still need 2/3 of all chapter chairs to pass them, which was not given. It was literally 2/3 of chapter chairs on a late night Zoom call that nobody was invited to. So yeah, and again, I have clearly listed out here those 3 points, all of which were missed, rendering these bylaws obviously not passed. But, oh, here's a transcript as well of that Zoom call. I recorded it. I typed this transcript because obviously the chairman did not want to keep official minutes or official records of these meetings. I wonder why. But as you can see, what I find quite strange and quite damning is it was asked, is everyone there? And then he immediately responds, yeah, everyone's here. So again, just back to this Peter thing, he admits Swanee has a chapter. He didn't send Peter the link. You would think you would notice when there are 3 other people than you on a Zoom call, you think you notice if Peter wasn't there. But yeah, feel free to look over this very strange transcript here. As you can see, every time I brought up a point of refutation, it was just silence for like 10 to 30 seconds. It was a very awkward call. Yeah. Anyway, now all this would be fine if he would admit, the bylaws never passed, but he is publicly claiming they passed. He put on his LinkedIn, and still on his LinkedIn today, by the way, you can all go and check, that he reorganized the organization after rewriting and adopting new bylaws. He texted his whole board of directors the bylaws have passed. And as you can see at the end of this transcript right here, he says, I mean, it's 3-4, it passed. So I mean, I don't know what to say. Lastly, finishing up the open letter, thus all of the undersigned members and officers promise to never send even a penny of dues to TNCR and to continue to treat your proposed bylaws as illegitimate and never comply with any one of their changes. You attempted to stack the convention election, suppressed information preceding the bylaw vote, and then held a sham bylaw vote that we deem illegitimate has brought disrepute to TNCR. We once again demand your resignation, as well as TNCR's denouncement of your proposed bylaws as null and void, and a free and fair election for your replacement. Since the actual bylaws in Article 3, Section 2A explain that the vice chair immediately assumes the chair following your resignation, we demand the vice chair to resign immediately as well so that the chair position can be up for election. And since this open letter was written, Nick, Harsh's vice chair, has agreed with us in writing. He wants no part of this because he says he'll step down gladly. And lastly, we demand any others who collaborated or are complicit in your subversive acts to also promptly resign for violation of their fiduciary duty in Article 3, Section 11, and for TNCR to hold a free and fair election to fill those two and any other open board of director roles. And then, as you can see, lots of people signed it. But yeah, now we can take a moment to hear from the impeached TNCR chair in his opening statement. Harsh, are you on this call? Let me stop sharing. It appears he is not. Okay, then. I will resume sharing. So, since the impeached chair cannot give a statement, we will go through to all the chapter chairs where they can deliver statements, present evidence in the record, and question the impeached TNCR chair. He is not here, so I guess if he decides to pop his head in, you guys can question him. And we'll just go in alphabetical order by university name. So Austin P, Belmont, Carson Newman, Cumberland, ETSU, Freed-Hardeman, Lee, Memphis, MTSU, Swanee, Tennessee Tech, UTK, Vanderbilt. And yeah, I'm going to stop sharing just so we can put the focus on you guys. But Austin P, if you guys would like to go first, you guys have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Shane. So sorry I dropped in pretty late, but my name's Thomas Byron. I'm the Austin P State University CR president. But to get started with everything, the fact that information has not been flowing properly is kind of concerning for me, considering, well, I mean, granted, I had some stuff going on the weekend of the convention, so I couldn't attend, but I had some members there, and they were telling me how it seemed stacked against everybody, and it just didn't sound like it was very fair. So that kind of concerned me a lot. And the fact that there was a bylaw vote off, like in the middle of the night, as I assume that's what the time was, kind of is a concern too, because if I had known, I would have stepped in and, put my vote in. But just the fact that that is like a concern that we have to worry about, to me, is more than enough reason to pretty much go on with this impeachment. And the fact that we're paying, or that we're required to pay $5 for each member, just to me does not sit well. And pretty much I stand with the fact of we shouldn't be paying for that, especially because we don't know where that money is going to be going to. But other than that, that's all my statement.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Okay, so it looks like Belmont is next in alphabetical order. She texted me she might come late. I don't see her. So I guess if she comes later, we can give her an opportunity to speak. Carson Newman, Carson Palmer, are you there? I guess not. Okay, Cumberland, you're next. Josh, would you like to say anything?
Not really. I don't have anything to add to this.
Okay, sounds good. Freed-Hardeman, you there? Luke Foster, Freed-Hardeman. Okay. We got Brandon Newell of Lee.
Yeah, so I just want to reiterate what Thomas said. Obviously, I think we all have an issue with the dues. That will not happen at Lee. I really don't think that there's enough benefits that TNCR gives to us. Most of the incentives that we get is actually from the national chapter, and serving on the board, I think that this is a complete just mess of leadership. So I just want to make sure that he knows that. The fact that he's not here obviously says a lot. It also says a lot that he wanted to completely change bylaws. I know Caesar's on this call. Caesar worked super hard on these bylaws. I worked with Preston, who's the chairman, and it's kind of like he's spitting on every single name that's on that bylaw by just redoing it. So I have a huge issue with that, and I wish that I could ask him questions, but of course he's not here.
Thank you very much, Brandon. Would you also like to touch on your experience with the convention, though? Because I remember you brought some concerns up to me about that.
Yeah, so whenever I served on it, we had an apportionment committee. Caesar served on it with me. And basically, we took a few weekends to kind of realize and analyze who are going to get a certain amount of votes. So obviously, Lee is not going to get as many votes as Vanderbilt. So that was never sent out. And also, we got a lot more votes. I know Vanderbilt did this. We got a lot more votes during the convention. I feel like it was kind of a mess with the voting. I know, Shane, you were asked to be to count the votes with them, which was really odd. So I think the whole process was very weird, especially because there's a lot of people that wanted to run. I don't know if anyone from Lee wanted to run, but I think that it would have been better to open it up to everyone.
Yeah, and you told me your chapter was never even invited, though, right?
Yeah, we weren't invited. I just saw the social media post and we just showed up. Whenever I was there, so last, I guess 2022, we got an invitation from the board. So that was really odd that we didn't get an invitation this year.
Thank you, Brandon. Anything else? Okay, so that was Lee. So Memphis, Max, would you like to say something?
All right, yes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Max Bonner. I am a junior at the University of Memphis, and I am the president of the College Republicans chapter there. And my experience with this whole thing is obviously the convention took place earlier this month. The thing is, our chapter was neither notified nor was even aware of the fact that this event was even going to take place. I mean, think about it for me real quick. A chapter with 47 members on our roster was not even able to have a voice in all these important matters that were raised. So obviously that's something that's very concerning. And of course, on March the 13th, Shane reached out to me and notified me of all these events that had taken place, including these new bylaws that are frankly just damaging. And one issue I want to raise with him too is with these dues that everyone's going to be forced to be paid, which, as I'm sure many people have mentioned, their colleges don't even allow them to give money to outside organizations. And simultaneously, later on in these new bylaws, we find that the chapter has unilateral powers to revoke their charters with a snap of a finger. So does that now mean that pretty much most of these chapters will now get their charters revoked simply because they weren't even allowed to follow along with this new and unjust bylaw? And yeah, another thing that I'd like to point out too, and one thing that I would like to state for the record, is I did not sign on to this effort because I have a personal vendetta against Chairman Mehta or against anyone on the leadership of Tennessee College Republicans for that matter. But I believe as a matter of principle that it is only right to call out corruption whenever it rears its ugly head. In fact, one very good analogy that I think goes along well with this situation would be what happened in my mother's home country of Venezuela, in which a leader took over power through very questionable means, proceeded to overturn their constitution and granted him unprecedented levels of power, and ultimately hurt his country more than he did help. And before I continue any further, I would also like to state that Chairman Mehta's absence from this hearing speaks volumes as to what his status is, either innocent or guilty. If he truly believed that he was innocent, why would he not take this opportunity to come forth to us and try to prove to us as to why he is innocent? And even if if now was not a convenient time for him. I'm sure we all would have very gladly would have liked to move the time of this meeting to a different time. We would have been more than happy to do that. And yet he didn't even reply with a preferred time to meet. And so to me, it just looks like he is trying to avoid accountability for his actions, which I believe is very unbecoming of a leader. And with that, if the chairman was here, I would like to read from the following questions that I would have asked him if he was here. And actually later on, Shane, I will email you some supporting screenshots that I have, which kind of prove as to why a couple of my questions are actually legitimate. So my questions are as follows. Number one, how do you expect us as prospective politicians, judges, lawyers, media personalities, and other influencers of the sort to go forth and call out the corruption of this current Democratic administration while we simultaneously turn a blind eye to the corruption that is happening within our own organization? And then number two, does he have any regret or a shred of remorse for the disgusting and absolutely demeaning comments that he made to the Belmont president, which reads, and I quote, "People think women, especially blondes, are dumb, so it will be easier for you to get information," end quote. Number three, during the sham vote, you claimed that there were only 6 active college Republican chapters in the state of Tennessee. Yet on your personal LinkedIn page, you claim to have acted as the principal liaison to 8 chapters in the Middle Tennessee region alone. So how do you explain these contradictory statements? Number 4, during this past week, you made an effort to reach out to the chapter chairs that you previously denied the existence of, including my own, which he recently made that call to me this past Thursday. And while I am glad that he is finally willing to acknowledge the existence of our chapters, why did he only do so when his chairmanship was on the line as opposed to prior to this convention? Let's see. And then number 5. Let's say hypothetically this impeachment vote fails, which I do not believe it will. You still have a majority of chapters that oppose you and the corrupt actions that you have done as of recently. So you will be forced to work with us going forward. So how do you plan on restoring our already broken trust in you? And finally, number 6. You already have all this evidence against you proving your corrupt actions. You have your predecessors denouncing you and a vast majority of chapters calling you out. And it's clear that you remaining as chair only does more damage that you have already done to our organization. So I would like to ask you, will you finally do the right thing for once and resign? And if not, have you no shame? And with that, I yield the floor.
That was very powerful, Max. Thank you very much. That was really good. Okay, so next, that was Memphis. So now next we have MTSU. Well, since Chairman Mehta isn't here, I know Nick is from MTSU. Nick, would you like to say anything on this? I mean, no pressure.
Hi, Shane. I honestly, I just joined in. Really, I don't have anything to add other than what we've talked about over text message. So, of course, obviously, I'll reiterate the fact that if this vote inevitably leads to the impeachment, then I'm stepping down, of course, as we talked about in the text message. So that's all from me, and that's all from MTSU.
Thank you for standing up for what's right, Nick. We appreciate it. So next we've got Swanee. Peter, would you like to say something?
Yes, I have written a little statement Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for coming to this hearing, which represents a crucial turning point for our organizations. My name is Peter Seifert, and I'm a senior at Sewanee, as well as the president of the Sewanee College Republicans. It is my strong hope that this hearing will result in a new beginning for Tennessee College Republicans, and that the outcome will bring about statewide unity and camaraderie. First, however, we must deal with our organization's disunity resulting from the current chairman's complete dereliction of duty. This past month has revealed persuasive, even conclusive evidence that Harsh Mehta, the current state chairman of the Tennessee College Republicans, must be impeached after violating numerous articles in the TNCR bylaws. After the state convention on March 11th, Harsh called for a vote on new proposed bylaws that include numerous provisions vastly expanding the chairman's executive powers, as well as imposing the unprecedented requirement of a $5 member fee for all chapters. This would absolutely cripple Sewanee's chapter, as we are a small school with an equally small chapter. These changes are unacceptable to the Sewanee chapter, but these are not the reasons why Sewanee will vote for the removal of the current chairman. Some of the evidence against the current chairman includes the following. Harsh failed in a timely manner to properly provide Sewanee and other chapters the Zoom link enabling us to vote on the new bylaws. This egregious breach of protocol demonstrates a blatant disregard for proper procedures and may even indicate malicious intent. This failure is in flagrant violation of Article 9, Section 1, which states that, quote, out of convention bylaw changes require a unanimous vote by the TNC Board of Directors, a 2/3 vote by all chapter chairs, and at least 1 week notice prior to the votes, all of which we now know have been violated. Harsh knew very well that the majority of chapters were not present at this vote, with only 4 chapters represented. This is supported by figure L8 in the hearing chair's presentation that clearly shows that only a mere 4 chapters were invited to Zoom. Instead of suspending the vote or sending all the chapters the Zoom link, he allowed the illegitimate vote to proceed and has continued to act as if he had the authority not granted in accordance with bylaws. For the reasons set forth above, as well as vulgar, unprofessional conduct, the Sewanee chapter of the Tennessee College Republicans favors the immediate impeachment of Harsh Mehta. Thank you for your time. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you very much, Peter. That was also very good. Okay, so that was Sewanee. Next up is Tennessee Tech. Do we have Joshua Richardson? I do not believe so. Okay, so next up is UTK. So Sam, if you want to go first, and then we can have Caesar and Will also chime in because they're from UTK.
Yes, thank you. So my name is Sam Traylor. I am the president of UTK College Republicans. I am a junior with a major in political science. I would like to first construct my statement as a couple questions for the former chairman, and then give some commentary on them, and then continue on with my opening statement. So former chair Will Ogles, can you just please clarify for the hearing today exactly what the removal of a chapter charter entails?
Well, I don't have the bylaws in front of me, but my understanding is the revocation of charter means, and that can be for any reason, but primarily concerned here is if you do not re-charter over 2 cycles. In the bylaws, 2 cycles are semesters, essentially. This was changed, I believe, with the changes that Caesar made, to move it from a 1-year cycle to a 6-month cycle. But under my administration, we maintained that 1-year cycle. We did not do 2-year cycle.
Okay, thank you. And am I correct that to officially, via the bylaws, de-charter an organization either through inactivity or if the organization is not in good standing or so on and so forth, that a vote must be made within the board of directors?
That is true. In fact, we did hold a vote. It was actually for Vanderbilt, based on, did you know that, Shane?
Oh, yes, I was very well aware. I was very aware.
Yeah, so that was the only instance where we held that. So, you know, you have precedent to show that we did, when we felt it necessary to take a vote on chapter status, we were willing to do that. So Harsh would have been very well aware of the precedent that was required to de-charter chapters.
Okay, thank you. And then I just have one more quick question for you. And it is, under your chairmanship, either through the bylaws or your delegation of powers to regional chairs, whose responsibility was it to inform the individual chapters or their respective regions of either upcoming officer positions within the board of directors or the notification of the state convention?
That was delegated to regional vice chairs. Seeing as we had an issue with the East Regional Vice Chair, I took over that position for the East since essentially end of last year, going before convention. And if I just may mention, Brandon, I believe we had a phone call where I notified you of convention, did we not? About a week or so beforehand?
About this year's convention?
Yes.
No, I saw it on a social media post. I didn't get anything, but it would have been from what's his name? Who is
It should have been from Tyler Brooks, but I'm 90% sure I called you because I also called Carson Newman right
Yeah.
afterwards.
Yeah, I remember you calling. I just don't remember you saying anything about convention.
Okay. All right. Well, I thought we had covered that, but that's all right. That was just more me wanting to make sure that we got that cleared up. Any other questions for me, Sam?
I don't believe so at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
So what we have seen here from the questions is quite simply that the responsibility to inform the individual chapters of the upcoming state convention or rechartering information or any sort of officer positions for the board of directors was responsible to the regional board of directors. And if I'm not mistaken, Harsh Mehta was the regional director for the middle region, which, Shane, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that Vanderbilt is under the middle region. Is that correct?
You are 1,000,000% right.
Okay, so it's very difficult for me to see any sort of possible just I forgot or negligence on that part. It definitely seems like the argument backing of stacking the officer positions, as we have seen evidence in past testimony, either through Shane Muma and text messages, therefore. So even if you consider it negligence, that is still, in my regards, an impeachable offense. If you don't have the amount of time to completely dedicate your fiduciary powers and responsibilities dedicated by the bylaws to this organization, you have no right being in any sort of board of director position or nevertheless a state chairman position. If you don't have the time, you shouldn't be in the role. So any sort of excuse in regards to I didn't have enough time or I forgot to send out the email is inexcusable in this sense. Having a state convention representation from your chapter chairs, I believe, is one of the most important events of the year to have. Not to mention, it is a great sense of camaraderie and community within the entire chapter, because at least for me last year in my first convention that I went to, it was a great time to meet people from other chapters. It's a great time to also communicate with other people and kind of see the different ideas and things that different people had. And I think that that is an extremely important thing. And honestly, it is very selfish to just completely take away any sort of notification that you had. Not to mention the fact that my organization, UTK alone, as well as many others, were not given any sort of notice about the state convention, or were not even informed that they were a real organization, per Harsh's words. It's completely ridiculous that if Will Ogles just said that no vote were taken to decharter any organization, that Harsh Mehta would assume that only 6, or if you're taking his LinkedIn page, maybe 8 chartered organizations actually existed. It is completely nonsense, and it doesn't make any sense. So it completely excluding these chapters is completely against the bylaws in and of itself. It is very clear on how the process should be taken to decharter, and therefore those organizations are chartered, which alone makes his bylaw vote just a complete sham and incomplete. I think that this alone should be actions to impeach. Not to mention, if you were to even go into his proposal for his impeached bylaws, Max Bonner from University of Memphis put it great, that there was just a great dictatorial-esque overreach in a lot of his bylaw proposals. I know that VCR, as well as myself, have done a full breakdown of the proposal. I think that it is very criminal almost to call yourself a Republican organization and then include such sections or little sentences in your new proposed bylaws to add things that say things like the state chairman has sole responsibility over these, or like Max Bonner from University of Memphis pointed out, that there are things that the state chairman has sole responsibility on removal of chapters. I think that's completely ridiculous, and it completely removes due process. So taking out the proposed bylaws, you still have the issues at hand here. And I think that at the end of the day, that is the main reason why this impeachment is brought up. I know that I received a phone call from him, as well as many other chapters, that was really highlighting and explaining his issues. He tried to explain to me some of his bylaws, and then asked about the chartering and how we weren't chartered or things like that, which, again, I'll put a side point here. Whose fault is it really if we aren't chartered? Is it the fault of us organizations for not rechartering, or TNCR, which would be Harsh Mehta by extension, of not informing us of how to recharter? I can speak for myself, as well as many other people, that a lot of us don't even know what rechartering constitutes. If I didn't receive an email or a phone call from Will Ogles, I wouldn't have had any information on my mistake of recharter or anything like that this year. And that's completely ridiculous to have as a whole. And going back to the phone calls again, it speaks just so much volumes that he would target and call the minor organizations or the chapter chairs that he claimed were not legitimate chapters, and try to explain them and try to say, oh, well, I'm sorry for the actions that I've taken and all of this, but never contact the one who proposed the amendment impeachment in the first place. VCR and Shane Muma have led this fight from the beginning. They were the one that brought the statement. They were the one that a lot of the text messages, which he claimed were blackmail, were in regards to, as well as Emma Curtis from Belmont. I mean, if I were in this position, I would think that the first thing I would do if I were to try to rectify any sort of conflict that I had within the organization, that I would first address the person who led the entire thing, not these minor organizations which had problems and issues beforehand, which I will state on the record, he never officially said that organizations like UTK and these other small ones were actually chartered. He never declared that. He just said that the chartering was questionable. So I think that the points that I've given alone are the biggest reasons why Harsh Mehta needs to step down and resign. I don't know why he has done so already. It just seems like a massive drawn out process. But I really don't think that this is how everyone wished to spend their Saturday, nevertheless their semester, dealing with an entire impeachment hearing over such terrible proposals and just a complete power grab. It's such a shame that TNCR has devolved into this, and I really hope that in the future that we can learn two things from this. One, that we can have free and fair elections in the future, and that two, we can amend the bylaws if needed to properly fix and make sure that issues like this do not happen in the future. And with that, I finish my statement and would give the floor to Cesar Schazenbach.
Thank you a lot, Sam. And you said a lot of really great things there. And just kind of building off of that and on the spirit of what really everyone else has said, there's not a lot more that I can add. I'm not even a current student in Tennessee. I graduated from the University of Tennessee last spring and am now at Capital University in law school. So I just wanted to take a little bit of my time here to commend everybody for their professionalism and the, true nature of political brotherhood that TNCR and the Republican Party is supposed to embody. This is exactly the type of teamwork that we should be working on, and it's unfortunate that it's under such unfortunate circumstances, but it's good that we can all prove that we have the ability to work across geographical boundaries and indeed political differences to accomplish a greater goal and to make sure that all of our chapters are best served. I do want to take just a little bit of my time for the sake of transparency and making sure that everyone has a fundamental understanding of the bylaws. As Brandon talked about earlier, I was the principal drafter for the most recent amendments. Earlier in the presentation, during Shane's opening statement, he pointed out that the failure of Harsh to give a full week for consideration of a bylaws. He said that that had to have been brought under unanimous consent because it was outside of convention. I just want to clarify that that's not the case. He still has to have a week before the vote is taken on behalf of both the board of directors and the chapter chairs, and that was not met. But the provision regarding unanimous consent only refers to amendments that are to be brought at the state convention, because there's a separate process for amending the bylaws at state convention. So I just wanted to clarify that, but please be sure the bylaws were violated in that regard. There still needs to be a week notice before votes on the board of directors and the chapter chairs, and that did not occur. I also wanted to address, as I emphasized in my email yesterday, which I'm sure most of you got, when Harsh said that he was the one who was supposed to properly be chairing this meeting, because he was under the impression that all meetings under the TNCR name were governed by Robert's Rules of Order. And I just want to emphasize again that that's not true. Harsh, as TNCR chair, is only entitled to preside over meetings of a board of directors. And this meeting, as one that is governed by the bare bones impeachment process that the bylaws talk about, doesn't have any formal requirements. And as I wrote in my email, it's really just an ad hoc meeting. And so I just wanted to state for clarification that there is no need for the formalities that Robert's rules dictate for meetings of a board of directors as it applies to this meeting. There doesn't need to be minutes. Nobody is taking minutes right now, and that does not matter. It doesn't even necessarily have to be recorded, but it's obviously a great thing that Shane is recording it. So in case anyone or Harsh talks about later, or anyone brings up another issue regarding the process that this hearing took place, I assure you, on at least behalf of my personal opinion, everything is okay. I also, again, I want to continue my positive comments by commending Josh Page for being here, and also for commending the majority of the board of directors that are serving with Harsh right now, as they've dealt with all of this on their own behalf. I understand that there's a lot of animosity right now and a lot of heated tensions, but especially with respect to you, Josh, and as it relates to Carson, who unfortunately is not here today, I hope you understand that none of what has happened and all of the feelings that have occurred over the past couple weeks or so are directed at you guys. You guys, we don't know how much information that you've had. We don't know what your feelings are, but whether or not you vote yes or no on the ultimate impeachment, we're just glad that you have been actively communicating that you want to be part of the process. And I hope you know that we do all think very highly of you, and that we do commend you. And likewise, like I said, the members of a board of directors, Nick, who was earlier on the call, he's done a great job at communicating, as well as Isabella, who's the current treasurer. I've had multiple calls with her, and I've gotten her to better understand her and the board of directors' obligations under the bylaws. And I really do think that everyone else on the board has done the best that they can do within the circumstances to communicate. So I just want to say that. And finally, I just wanted to at least give my opinion, and I'm not sure if I'm correct, because like Will said, he wasn't quite sure as well. But Sam, when you asked what the I can't remember the exact question, but Will answered it in terms of how many times previously a chapter had to recharter each year. My understanding was that it's always been, at least for the past decade or so, because when we amended it the last year, we had that was the first time that we had amended the bylaws in a decade. But my understanding of that was, for a decade, every chapter had to recharter twice a year, once each semester or rechartering cycle. But the amendments that we made to the bylaws in 2022 actually extended the deadline to recharter. But of course, it's still on the board of directors at large, as part of their fiduciary obligation, to make sure that each chapter chair knows that they have an obligation to submit rechartering documents to the state board. But again, I don't really have any more comments. Again, I just want to thank everyone for their professionalism, and I'm glad I've made a few friends out of this, actually. And I hope I can be helpful in the future. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Caesar. Will, is there anything else you'd like to add from UTK?
Yeah, I mean, just a few things. As Caesar and Brandon can both attest, I'm actually the one that brought forward a motion that allowed Harsh to join the board of TNCR. I believe it was 2 cycles ago, over the objection of at the time Preston, who was chairman. So I do feel I do like Harsh on a personal level because I've worked with him so much, which is what really has been frustrating to me about this process. Because he did, I mean, I think it's almost inarguable the best and most work of anybody on the board last year, which is what has made this entire process so confounding. Why he would do great work his entire time on the board, and as soon as he becomes chairman, he just decides that he wants to kind of take everything over and change things. Harsh also did not notify me that he wanted to make any bylaws changes, because if he had, we could have done that at convention. Yeah, I assume it took him more than, a week or two to write up all of these bylaw changes. So he probably would have had them by the time convention occurred. And he knew as well as I did the process for going through convention to change the bylaws. So if he wanted to do this in an open process, he could have done it then, and there would have been no issue. Um, so like I said, I find this very confusing. This has really kind of changed how I feel about Harsh on a personal level as somebody who's worked with him extensively, and it saddens me. I know some of you may have had issues with my chairmanship, or Max may not have known I was chairman because I didn't know his chapter existed. That's on me for not checking. We did have a contact for Memphis, but I believe it was a 3-year out of date contact, and they didn't know when we reached out to them at the beginning of my term. But I'm deeply saddened by these proceedings, but I hope we do come to a resolution that we can all be happy with. And I just really hope Harsh starts returning phone calls and text messages, because I would like to hear more of an explanation from him. Because when I spoke to him week before last about this, and asked him about his proposals, all he said is, "I'll figure it out," and didn't have any real answer for my questions. So I hope that's changed, and he is able to give himself a defense that makes some logical sense, just to kind of balance the sheet here. But yeah, that's all I really have. Does anybody have any questions for me as former chair? I guess I could field some of those. Well, seeing none, I'll yield the balance of my time back to the chair.
Thanks, Will. Okay, so I guess if UTK is done, that leaves Vanderbilt. I've already quite explained my position, but I know Secretary Ron Yee wanted to speak briefly, given he was the one who was negotiating with Harsh prior to this. So maybe he wants to discuss what his perspective is. Ron, would you like to do that?
Okay, yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Ron Yi. I'm the Vanderbilt College Republican Secretary, and I just have a couple of things to say. As I believe I was informed of this on the day after the state convention by Shane of these new bylaw changes, and that's where it all basically started. As Shane was busy for that week, I was given the job as lead negotiator for calling Horsch and talking with him. My experience with Horsch, I believe he was, I would like to say, quite professional for the beginning, I believe. And like we had a conversation, we talked about it. Uh, Basically it was like we just like as Vanderbilt, we all had like an issue over the $5 dues and like the sub issue of subcommittees, as we felt that went against Republican values of higher taxation and no big government. Of course, when I talked with Horsch, gave him a total of 3 phone calls. The first phone call, we had a conversation, and he actually, I believe, relented on one of the issues we had with the bylaws, kind of, which was the issue of how like officers couldn't uh, basically support candidates in the Republican elections or like real life elections. But like he just said like I was adding in an official capacity. I'm not sure if he adds adding, but like even then, if like the original interpret, he was telling me like the way the law was, the section was worded, it seemed like if you were chapter chair and you like on your personal account, you say you supported a candidate, for example, Shane on like Kemp, you could get your charter revoked for 2 consecutive cycles. And I was completely shocked at that because that was a breach of free speech. And I was talking to him, this doesn't make sense. He said it was like, I just interpreted it incorrectly, which kind of confused me because that was like a very vaguely written out law, so that like it could be interpreted anyway. And it was that basically meant it was the sole interpretation of the state chair. Of course, our second phone call, it was the issue like our first phone call we were not able to get through with someone issue of the $5 dues. So on the second phone call, I talked to him about the $5 due issue, and he was not budging on that. He was unwilling to talk anymore about it, so we ended the call there. And I would like to correct myself. I said 3 calls, I meant 2 calls. The third time was like I was asking about the contact information of other chapter chairs and the old bylaws. Of course, like when I texted him and I tried to like remind him about it, he did not respond to anything, and he just basically ignored me. And that was basically the end of my conversation with him. And after that was I handed over during spring break to the rest of VCO, and I wish I recorded my conversation with him because like there was one instance I believe I asked him specifically how many chapters there were. He specifically told me there was only 6, and that it was basically, he told me word for word, it was Vanderbilt, Carson Newman, Cumberland, University of South, which was Savani, Belmont, and MTSU. I asked him about, I just picked a random school, but I asked him what about UDK, because according to like, I believe there was like a website for UDK that I saw, it seemed like they were active. So I asked him about UDK, and he was like, I'll look into that. And I don't know what happened afterwards. I guess he did not look into it because he basically just confirmed the existence of only 6 chapters. I wish I recorded that, but I did not know it was gonna go this far. But as after like that week and after the passing of the bylaws, my duties were given back to Shane as he and other board members contacted you all and started this great impeachment hearing. And I guess I'll yield it here.
Thank you, Ron. So Sam and Will, just briefly, do you guys think that's a bit crazy that he denied your chapter's existence, given Will is from UTK and was the former chair? I mean, clearly.
I think.
I mean,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Will.
I think part of the issue that Harsh had with understanding there was a chapter at UT was that following transition, because we had people from UT slated, they had delegates at convention. They just, Harsh never asked for a complete chapter list, ever. So he never asked about UTK. He never asked. I have the stuff that Brandon, who I believe is, oh no, he's still here, that sent me, and that Carson Newman sent me. I have all of that, but he never requested a full chapter list during transition. He's actually asked no questions about transition. Really, the last thing that I heard from him, well, obviously we've spoken about this on a phone call, which was the last text I got from him, and then he had asked about minutes at convention. That's the only things he's asked since he became chairman, as far as what he needs to do. Hasn't asked for passwords, hasn't asked for really anything, or to set up a meeting where I could give him that information. He just has not asked for anything, which I also find very confusing, which may lead into him wanting to restrict some, chapters and things by not acknowledging they exist, because to him, he doesn't know because he never asked.
I will just really briefly, just one sentence, and then we can get to Caesar. So Caesar sent me the contact info from Caesar's time as vice chair. And with that contact info, I was able to get in contact with every chapter within 24 hours. So it really was not hard if I'm just some random guy who's never been involved in TNCR. So I will just point that out for the record for Harsh, like with the info that, was had, it was not hard to find these chapters. But Caesar, what were you gonna say?
Hold, just real quick. I just wanted to state that on the first phone call that I had with Harsh, which was after the passing of the bylaws, it did come off as accusatory to our chartered organization, that it was more like, I don't have any chartering information on you. Why did you vote to impeach me type thing, which doesn't exactly make sense. And again, I've said this before, but the only information that I have had towards any of the results of the state convention elections or the proposal of the bylaws, in fact, I found out after the vote, was from Shane Muma, not Harsh Mehta or anyone from TNCR at all.
Caesar, what were you gonna say?
I just wanted to supplement what Will was talking about and how it's concerning that it doesn't appear that Harsh is taking, and of course this is this discussion is a little bit far from the core of what the impeachment hearing is about. It's about his failure to adequately pass the bylaws and his total failure to maintain a fiduciary relationship with the chapters. But it is concerning that he doesn't appear to know his obligations as chair right now. I was when I had my time to speak, I commended the communication efforts on the board of directors, and just to go along with that, last time that I spoke with Isabella, which was a couple of days ago, I reached out to her because I realized that in light of everything that's going on right now, there's stuff that she has an obligation to do that she might not know she has an obligation to do, and it could put TNCR in a bigger trouble than anything that we're doing right now. So I called her and we talked about what's happening right now, and she told me her thoughts, and that was everything okay. But I said, do you understand that under the bylaws, you have an obligation that, in my belief, is twice a year to submit official campaign finance documents to the Tennessee Registry of Election Finance, or something along those lines. It's explicitly stated in the state bylaws. It's a legal obligation that TNCR has, and it's the obligation of a treasurer to submit those reports. And she said that after, of course, I had sent you the bylaws, Shane, and after you sent those out to everybody, because I'm not under the impression that Harsh sent out the bylaws to his board of directors. But she said, I read through the bylaws. It wasn't anything like I didn't read it through. She said she reached out to Harsh and asked him what this whole finance document thing was about. And his response was, don't worry about that. We'll get to it when it comes. And I mean, that's one way to answer it, but you can draw your own conclusions with respect to that. But I had to inform her, like, I don't have a great deal of, I had to tell her I don't have a great deal of understanding because I was never treasurer. And when I was on the board, that was always handled between the treasurer and the state chair. But you have to reach out. I gave her the information for Alex Shremkowski, who's the Southern Regional Vice Chair. And, she hopefully reached out to him. But I just wanted to add that.
Yeah.
Will, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a major issue. Because I believe they have 30 days from the end of convention to basically the state treasurer has to sign on as the fiduciarily responsible person with the Tennessee Election Finance Commission, and do TREF reports in non-election years every 2 years. So last year, being an election year, we had to do it, I believe 6 times. We had to do it once a quarter, and then before the primary and before the general. And that was all. I handled all of that. Our treasurer really wasn't involved in that process. But that does have to be submitted in a timely manner, or you incur, I believe it's a $1,500 fine. It's quite substantial. We almost had the same issue before I came in as state chair as well. So that is not, knowing that they haven't done that yet is actually a major fiduciary issue and could cause some major problems and get us not only fined, but unrecognized as a political action committee under the Tennessee Election Finance Commission.
Caesar, you can go.
Thank you. I also just wanted to add on the issue of finance. I'm quickly just running through what Harsh tried to propose in terms of in terms of his bylaws, just to see if I can recognize the same language, because of course he did use some of the language from the existing bylaws to form the base of his bylaws. I don't see it here, and again, I'm not reading this thoroughly right now, so I might be incorrect. But the current state bylaws state that no time, and this goes to the issue of how the state treasurer, who is not the chief executive officer of TNCR, is the one who has the fiduciary and legal obligation to submit these reports to the state government. The current state bylaws state that at no time shall one person have access and manage TNCR's finances. And as I'm reading, just skimming through his finance section of the bylaws now, it doesn't appear that he has that language there, which is a huge cause for concern. You can't, in terms of a way that, I mean, honestly, I think it's self-evident. I hope I don't have to explain it anymore, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really concerning, Caesar, that he also said to Isabella, oh, we'll just figure that out when we get to it. Because that sounds like the exact same language he said to, I think it was Emma, I can't remember who, about the dues thing. Like, how are we even going to charge dues when the certain schools aren't legally allowed to give it? He's like, oh, we'll just figure it out. We just need to get it passed. Because I know Vanderbilt in particular is very, 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 very specific and strict with their money, given they're a nonprofit and they don't want to lose their nonprofit status. So them giving their money to an actual political party, I don't see any way that's ever going to happen. And it's just weird. He would never let us reach out and explain that to him and understand how wrong these bylaws are. Because even Nick, unfortunately, Nick is no longer on the call, but Nick told me, like, he's totally against dues. He said the first thing he did when he became, I think, president of some other conservative group on his campus was suspend their dues. So I just, that's really the tip of the iceberg with these bylaws here. I mean, since we haven't, I'll just briefly share my screen and just show these to you guys real quick, since we haven't even looked at them on this call, and then I'll go ask Jose for his comment, because I know Jose, our other treasurer, wanted to say something into the record about Harsh. But yeah, I mean, we have this whole annotated document of why it's bad. Here's the part about the dues. Oh, here's the part about that gives him dictatorial power. So basically, if any chapter violates these bylaws, their charter is revoked automatically and immediately, unlike before with a vote. And here it says the state chairman shall be responsible to interpret, administrator, and enforce all these bylaws, which is insane. What is this? Okay. Oh yeah, the chairman has sole authority to declare vacancies on his board, and then all powers not described are for the state chairman. Takes all power away from the chapter chairs here, that basically the board of directors would vote to remove board of directors, unlike now where it's chapter chairs. I mean, this part is unnecessary. Again, this is more just everything up to the chairman. Free and fair elections would be nice instead of appointees. Here's a power grab about him, all these appointed positions he's adding. Again, more stuff about impeachments. Here's another power grab. He created 7 appointed positions on his board of directors for the state chairman to appoint. That's fun. Here's that whole giant article about subcommittees. These ones are literally like secret police. Look, this one is providing semester reports, going to meetings and looking at seeing if there are bylaw violations. The political subcommittee does this too. Report any violations to TNCR about bylaws being broken. And again, more semesterly reports. Here's a whole finance subcommittee about collecting dues from us. And they all the people on these subcommittees, of course, serve at the pleasure of the state chairman, because why would they not? Special sections of the board of directors where they don't actually have to have all the votes there. Let's see. Oh, the state chairman's allowed to fine certain club officers. I thought this was a gem. So like if one of the chapter chairs being bad, he can impose a fine, a reprimand, or removal from office. It's like this. Some of this stuff is just silly. I won't get too much into it, given these are not the actual bylaws for obvious reasons, as we've all laid out. But yeah, a lot of this stuff is just quite crazy. And stuff about the convention, like this year we heard about the convention, we as in Vanderbilt, on February 3rd, and here it's talking about January 15th. So I don't even know. And then one more thing I wanted to show. This is one of my favorite parts of this. All appropriations shall authorize the state chairman to incur obligations and to make payments from the funds of the committee for specified purposes, which shall include but not limited to official travel, air, water, land, speaker cost, event venue costs, printing, supplies, meals, lodging, and gas. So if all these dues are for the state chairman slush fund, that doesn't sound very fair to me.
That would have been nice for me.
No, yeah, I mean, Will, you should have done this, man. You're behind. But yeah, anyway, now that we looked at that, Jose, I know you wanted to say something about your experience at the convention.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much. Yeah, just quickly, because obviously there's so much to show concerns about Harsh's conduct, but just one more thing, I guess, to add on. So VCR and a lot of their board members, our board members, and a lot of our members attended the state convention that one Saturday, and it was obviously very like blunt, I guess is the right word. The way we saw all these elections happening, and we just really didn't know what was going on, or the fact that we saw people running and we never got any information about if we could run for the TNCR board or the executive board. And anyway, so I was talking to Shane that day, and we were like, well, we never really found out about this. We're going to talk to Harsh, ask him to see if we can get a heads up next time. And which is what I did. I walked up to him with Shane that day, and basically I asked him hey, how does this work? To know for the next cycle, to see if one of our board members wants to run. And basically the only thing he told me was he immediately just said, well, with these new bylaws, there's going to be a new appointed positions opening up, I guess under his cabinet or under his administration. And that, I can talk to him. He gave me his card after that. I could talk to him in case I was interested in being considered for one of those appointed positions. But he completely dodged the question about, whether, about, how I wanted to know if, what the processes were for running for a position like that, the ones that we voted on for that day. And he gave me his card, and it's just, it's very concerning because it's basically he wanted all the positions to available for the other people in all the CR chapters to be for under his rule, basically, under his discretion. And it's just very concerning. It's just one more thing I wanted to add. And basically, yeah. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jose. Okay, and then I know I'll just briefly share my screen again because I know Max just emailed me the evidence he wanted to present. So I will just put that up here. So Max emailed me this screenshot from Emma Curtis, Harsh saying you will be a great asset. People think women, especially blondes, are dumb, so it'll be easier for you to get the information, but you are not dumb. So that makes it better. And I guess Max also sent me this screenshot of Harsh's LinkedIn. I mean, I've definitely looked at his LinkedIn, and this is how it is to this very day. He says he's the principal liaison to 8 chapters in the Middle Tennessee region, but he told Ron there are a total of 6 in the whole state. So yeah, I mean, I really don't have much more to say on that. I guess last call. Would anyone else like to say anything? And then if not, I can go to the closing statement. Oh, I guess we can go Alex and then Caesar.
How's everyone doing? So my name's Alex Wright, and I'm the vice president of VCR. And I just wanted to air out one main concern that's been brought up multiple times, and even in that last piece of evidence, is that his actions to limit the chapters that are reached out to and that he's acknowledged, in my view, just it takes an extreme level of negligence to take that course of action. Because I know prior to reaching out to any chapters, when this thing was in its infancy, in the case of UTK, it's very easy to find out if chapters exist or do not exist. all these schools, at least Vanderbilt and UTK does, I know for a fact, they have club systems that have them all. They have their leaders on it, contact information, all that's publicly available, and a quick Google search will yield that information. So I just found that that was grossly negligent, and even showing that he called everyone was in attendance at his first bylaw vote, and the discrepancy between 6 chapters and 8 chapters, and now we've uncovered 13. It's just something I wanted to put extra emphasis on because it's really not excusable, and it's considering he's claiming more chapters than he's even acknowledging when it only serves his interests is, in my view, impeachable, and his removal should be predicated on any of one of these facts, but that in particular. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Caesar?
Could you pull back up the LinkedIn photograph that you just had on screen?
Yeah, sure.
And I hate to perhaps end this hearing on an inquisitive note, but I do feel it's warranted to just point out, and again, as we were talking about earlier with another thing that I raised, this isn't directly related to what the impeachment charge is. The impeachment charge is violation of fiduciary obligations and his inability to effectively pass the bylaws, or rather his violation of fiduciary duty with respect to his failure to pass the bylaws. The last point that he makes there under Middle Regional Vice Chair, that he had to submit detailed quarterly reports to the region's activities to the Board of Directors and the Board of Advisors. There's no such thing as a Board of Advisors anymore. That was a third leg of TNCR's government structure that existed over the past decade. There's only 2 legs now: the Board of Directors and the chapter chairs. But before we amended the bylaws, there was a third one. It was called the Board of Advisors, and it was supposed to be composed of donors and alumni and other people that were, appointed through this whole complicated process. I guess it goes to show that it never really, took off. It didn't exist, and when we amended the bylaws, we removed every mention of it because it's just it's defunct and it's not real. But the fact that he put that there, that he probably took that right out of bylaws. He of course was Middle Regional Vice Chair back when before we had amended the bylaws, back when I was Vice Chair and Will was Eastern Regional Vice Chair. So again, this is inquisitive and I don't know what is true, but it raises the question about, if he put that there, is he operating under the bylaws that were passed, that were not the most recently amended bylaws, the bylaws that were in place from 2013 to 2022? Because if that's true, and he's communicating and making his presumptions and arguing, with us on certain procedural points based off of those, he's grossly mistaken, because those aren't the bylaws anymore. The new bylaws were passed in 2022, and there's no such thing as a Board of Advisors. So again, that's inquisitive, and he might have put that before we had amended in 2022. But I think I think it should be raised because of the fact that he could never present the actual bylaws to any of the chapters or apparently to the Board of Directors.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point, Caesar, because this whole time prior to you giving us the bylaws, we were thinking he was clearly in gross violation of the bylaws if he would never give them to us, because that's a pretty reasonable thing to ask for, like just out of general curiosity. Like even if we didn't think he was doing anything bad, we would have just liked to compare the new ones to the old ones to see like what changed. And I think if I'm remembering this right, I believe he said this was the first time the bylaws have been changed in like over a decade. So the old ones are defunct, which is weird, because I took him at his word. I didn't even realize until I talked to you, Caesar, that they were just, amended a year ago. So this whole thing is just very, very confusing. And it just seems like, it's a smart strategy of him. He has a complete monopoly on information because a lot of our chapters have been left out of all this stuff. So he can just say whatever he wants to. And it's until like, you Caesar came along, what were we to say, against it? That's just my take. Arthur, are you also still on this call?
I am. I don't have anything to add.
Okay, never mind then.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah, Arthur was our former secretary. He was the one talking to Harsh during that, the incident where he tried to revoke our charter. Caesar, is there anything you'd like to say from that incident, or?
Oh, you mean the vote that, could you ask a question again?
Yeah. Do you have any insights on that incident in last May? Because I feel like that proves an example of him, having some sort of vendetta against certain chapters.
I think Will, because it was kind of funny
Yeah.
because I was with Will during that. We were on a trip together, but Will can speak to that better. So if Will wants to talk about that.
Yeah, essentially, some of you may know, some of you may not. Essentially, in the bylaws that are still currently governing, chapters are not allowed to promote candidates in primaries, whether that be primarily on social media for public endorsements. Vanderbilt, I believe it was a post with Brian Kemp in Georgia, put that as a story, or it may have been an actual post on Instagram, which clearly violated a story. Okay. So that clearly violated the bylaws. We reached out to them. They quickly complied, took it down. And we decided as a board of directors that given the recalcitrance, we were not going to proceed with removal of chapter status because frankly, it would be a mistake to enforce such a harsh, ironically, course of action for something that was more than likely a mistake. I mean, I think as a course of policy and as bylaws, you're not allowed to endorse. I just think it's bad politics, especially in primaries. But yeah, we decided that we did take a vote. There were no votes to remove, but the process was handled correctly according to the bylaws. And Harsh was present for that.
Caesar?
And just to expand in terms of a policy, and I just want to make this clear so that everyone understands, and it's something that I had talked to Shane about before, because the idea that a simple post in which it appears that you officially endorse a person that's running in a contested Republican primary might get your charter revoked. That seems like a very far step, but I just want to emphasize that is something that we've actually tried to strengthen, and for good reason, over the past, when I was basically assigned Alex, who's our on the CRNC board now. When I came on the board, he said, we have decade-old bylaws. You want to go to law school? Can you look at them and try to change them? But one of the things he said was make sure that this is a stronger thing, because before we had dealt with a couple chapters that were they weren't acting in good faith with respect to that. They thought that indeed that for good reason. I mean, it's understandable to be confused about why that might not be a good policy. It might be violating free speech or one reason or another. But at the end of the day, TNCR is an affiliate of both. An official affiliate of both the Tennessee Republican Party and the College Republican National Committee. And both of those organizations have policies on how their affiliated organizations cannot endorse a candidate in contested Republican primary elections. That, as we were alluding to earlier when we talked about TNCR's financial obligations and reporting campaign finance reports to the state of Tennessee, that could get our organization in deep trouble and perhaps even disbanded. So we tried to make the process, seem scary, but also something that's very fair. So we amended it to make sure that if you did something like that, there had to have been a vote on whether or not your charter should be revoked. But at the end of the day, it's just that. It's just a vote. And like Will talked about, because if you handle it appropriately and you understand what went wrong and the reasons why you can't do that, then no one's going to vote to revoke your charter. It's just a vote. So I hope you guys understand why that's in the bylaws and why that provision exists.
Yeah, we think that provision is totally fair. What happened in that incident is we didn't even know that TNCR had bylaws at that point. We, like I said, we weren't invited to that convention. We really weren't aware what TNCR was, but I think within like a half hour, like as soon as we were told that was a problem, we immediately took that story down, which is just why we kind of viewed that as extremely harsh, that he, kept texting us like over and over, we're going to remove all you guys. We're going to do all these things. And it's like, but we just took it down and literally did not know. And again, just to pull up his bylaws real quickly, That's why we have an issue with this section, because like it's totally fair to have a vote and have due process. But in his, it says if any chartered chapter officers endorses a candidate in any primaries, the said chapter's charter shall be revoked automatically and immediately. Which the thing is, like, what do you qualify as an endorsement? Because what if someone wears like a DeSantis shirt to a meeting, right? Is that an endorsement? Or what if someone has a YouTube channel and is talking about who they want to win the 2024 primary? Is that an endorsement? Because it just says any chapter officer. It doesn't say, like Ron said, apparently Harsh said to Ron, oh, I'll add official capacity, but he never sent a new version of these bylaws. So, and that's one of the big problems here. He's just, it seems like he's operating fully based on verbal decree from himself, which is like, I am no part, I've never been on the TNCR board, but everything we're doing here is being emailed very transparently to everybody. And I feel like that's the way this should operate. It shouldn't be like, oh, I'll call this chapter and say one thing, I'll call another chapter, I'll say another. Like this stuff should be in writing and transparent to everyone, at least in my view. But with that, does anyone else have anything to say? If not, I can move to the closing statement. Okay, I guess I will move to closing. I was not expecting a 2-hour hearing, so thank you guys for all bearing with us here. Okay. Yeah, so basically in summary, my viewpoint after going through this hearing and listening from everybody is I think it's unequivocally clear that we all need to vote to remove Mr. Mehta from his position. As we all know, the vote of the chapter chairs is going to take place via Google form, which will be sent out once again at 6:02 p.m. Central on this coming Friday. And once again, they'll be sent to all 13 chapter chairs, and we need a total of 9 yes on removal votes for him to be removed. And the reason we think he should be removed is essentially all the reasons outlined in our letter here about the gross bylaw violations. First of all, as you folks remember, he clearly stacked the elections in his favor and did not notify chapters how to run elections, which in and of itself, that is very, very bad. But then, as you know, he proceeded after that to go ahead and propose immediately these new 30-page bylaws instead of the 14-page existing document, and propose them in an incredibly opaque process. Did not send them out to all chapters, did not invite all chapters to the vote, and did not comply with very, very reasonable requests for information, such as, hey, can we have the other chair's contact info? Hey, can we have your board of directors contact info? Hey, can we just see the actual TNCR bylaws just so we can like go ahead and compare them, make sure all this checks out. And then once he had that sham vote, he claimed everything passed. And it clearly didn't. I mean, just objectively looking at the requirements, it clearly did not pass. All of these chapters were excluded, and it's just very, very sad that he continues to maintain that publicly. But then at the same time, as you'll see, he called a number of the chapter presidents that he claimed did not exist or did not invite to the bylaws vote. And unfortunately, these phone calls were not recorded. Hopefully, any future phone calls with him will be, given he did not show up to this hearing. But let me just go ahead and read what he has been saying to these other chapters. So Mr. Bonner of Memphis said, Harsh finally called me a few moments ago, and this was on March 23rd, so that's 2 days ago. I was under the impression that you could, okay, he's talking about recording. We didn't really talk too much, but he apologized for my chapter not having a seat at the table and recognized that the bylaws were not probably followed when the vote took place, and going forward, he would do better. He wants me to send required charter info to him so we can be included in the records. Well, I'm glad and then he talks about his personal opinion. Sam said, per Harsh's words, he is revoking the bylaws and going back to stage 1. He acknowledges that the bylaws were passed incorrectly and claims that the reason most chapter chairs were not sent info on voting was because he didn't have the info or didn't know. Just again, I will reemphasize for the millionth time, it was so easy to get in contact with all these chapters. Caesar sent me the list he had from his time as vice chair. I texted everybody on that list, and within 24 hours, I had everybody's number. It was not hard at all. He says in the future, when the bylaws will come up again, he will do it the correct way, meeting with all the chapter chairs and proposing ideas that come up. And then Peter from Swanee said, okay, so I just got off the phone with Harsh. He said the same thing to me as Sam. I asked him how he was able to call Sam if he never had his info initially. And he said the former chair gave it to him. Well, could have asked Will earlier. How absurd. He could have gotten the info easily from the former chair way before this, but persistently claims the former chair was not following proper procedure. And I will note, Harsh has been claiming to all these guys he's talked to, he's blaming everything on Will. I mean, I don't think that's fair at all, but okay. And never gave me the info. I directly asked him if he would respect the impeachment vote, and he said he will. So it's unfortunate, if all this is true, that Harsh is essentially confessing that he massively violated the bylaws. He's not coming here to confess to all of us. He's not sending us all an email in writing admitting that. And he's not also sending us all an email in writing or communicating to all of us, hey, my bylaws are actually illegitimate. No, instead, he's still maintaining on his LinkedIn and on all public facing matter, his bylaws are the bylaws. So clearly he's just trying to sweep it under the rug, because he could have came to this hearing today and he could have tried to clear things up. He could have apologized and he could have admitted what was wrong and asked for mercy. But no, he did not. Instead, he's just calling chapters that supposedly don't exist, trying to make them feel bad for him. And I will note, another common excuse he's been giving is the reason he says we shouldn't be upset with these new bylaws because everything's being taken out of context. If you don't have a copy of the new bylaws, I'll gladly email them to you. I believe I've emailed it to everyone and you can read through them. Like Sam said, he made a version of grievances. We also made our own, an annotated version. And these are not being taken out of context. When there's a clause that says it's solely up to the interpretation of the chairman, nothing can be taken out of context. And the saddest part too is he's blaming his unprofessional conduct, and I guess maybe even these bylaws too, on a language barrier, he says, which is just, it's just sad, the excuse after excuse after excuse he made. And I think the cherry on top is that email he sent to all of us yesterday that Caesar was referring to, that Caesar and Brandon replied to, where Mr. Mehta was trying to claim this whole, Nick should be chairing this hearing, but I mean, why? He's just coming up with every single excuse in the book, but will not defend himself. So my position, and I know the position of the rest of the Vanderbilt board, is that this man needs to be removed, and we encourage all the fellow chapter chairs to vote for his removal once that Google form comes out, because that's great that he's admitting to some people at this point that he was wrong, but it's really too little too late. What's to stop him from doing this again in 6 months? What's everyone forgets? Literally nothing. So that's my take. That's my closing statement. I will stop sharing my screen here. Last call if anyone wants to say anything else, and then I guess we can wrap this hearing up.
I just want to say thank you, Shane, for organizing this whole coalition against this corruption that Harsh has really put himself in. And I just want to say, thank you for organizing this whole thing.
Of course, it is not how I wanted to spend my spring break and then now back at school. But I mean, we had to stand up for what is right. Before we even know you guys existed, we were asking our members in our 300 person group meeting, what will you guys pay dues? And people were rioting in there. So yeah, I mean, we have to stand up for what's right, and we will not take this. So thank you for the thank you, Peter.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you again, Shane. This has been very well done. I'm impressed with the professionalism and the high level at which this was done. I did want to ask Caesar, because I know we have talked about this shortly. Can you explain, you reached out to Courtney Britt, the national chairwoman. Can you say what she kind of told you on this?
Yeah, I reached out to her. She told me that the way that the CRNC grievance function works, which Shane's gonna have to respond to what I'm gonna say in a second, but he can talk about this too. My impression is that if we get 9 chapter chair votes to remove, and Harsh considers it illegitimate, and he just says I'm the chair anyway, or then you guys are going to take it up to the CRNC. And so if that's your intention, then please say so. But what she told me is that in that initial grievance process, she has to be a neutral arbiter, even though that she is the one that will ultimately be making the decision about, what is right, et cetera. So she referred me back to Alex Shremkowski, who, as I said before, is our Southern Regional Vice Chair on the national board. I reached out to him. He called me back and he said that he had been in contact with Shane, and that Shane knows the grievance process, and that so again, if Shane can talk about this in just a second, but I assume that once everything gets out of the way, and if this isn't resolved by next Saturday, that the next step will be the CRNC grievance process.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. We will keep fighting until, the corruption's done. So yeah, Alex did send me the info about the formal grievance process. It does seem very, very simple. A couple of us were talking about it last night. All it is it seems like let me just pull it up right here. So they call it the procedure for redress. All we do is the chapter, and then other chapters are able to sign on as well. So I would imagine it would be quite a few of us, submit a complaint to the CRNC via email, and then the respondent, who would be Harsh, has a week, so 7 days to respond, and then they decide what they want to do from there. And we've been clearly compiling all our evidence, so we have plenty of documentation. I mean, this hearing is recorded. I'm sure they'll be watching this as well. But yeah, it seems like a really straightforward and simple process, at least based on the document Mr. Shrimkowski sent me. So yeah, but my hope is Harsh, as he has claimed to, Peter will respect the will of the vote here. But if he didn't even come to the hearing to defend himself, this would have truly been his best chance. I'm not optimistic, but that may just be me.
And I just want to add as a final note to build upon what Peter had said and what Will said. Again, I'm really impressed by everyone's professionalism here. And as I talked about before, not on this meeting, but before, this is a tough time for college Republicans across the country. All of you, I'm sure, don't have a perfect understanding of the struggles that many state federations in the country are facing right now. There are a lot of state organizations that can't communicate with each other as effectively as we are here, that can't organize in a way that is as effective as we have done with respect to this issue. There's multiple states that have competing state federations, and there's now multiple national organizations that claim that they're for real college Republicans. And again, I want to commend everyone here for just really being the best of the best in the nation with respect to handling this. Again, this is not something new in terms of national controversies with Republican politics, or I'm sorry, college Republican politics. But it's something that we've handled very well, and I hope everyone here understands that you all are doing a great job.
Thank you, Caesar. Yeah, this has been a lot of work. Again, I was not predicting this when we went to that convention. Like, we had a great time, and then the next day, when we saw the bylaws, like we were kind of nervous, but I'm just like, Ron, just like call him, and I'm sure he'll just delete that part. Like, and then he's like declared World War III over it, which is, I don't know, just a bit weird. But I guess anyone else have anything else to add, and then we can go ahead and end this. Last call. Okay, well, with that, thank you all so much for coming to this hearing today. I'll stop recording.